Thank you all for coming out. We're happy to have you. Very happy to have Kesav Mohan here. Been working with him a little bit in the past couple weeks, and got really great valuable insights from him. So, a little background: Kesav graduated from Duke Law 2009. Went straight into doing operations work for a tech startup and raised a pretty hefty round of funding, about $10 million, doing operations for Zenith sound innovations. Then he went and did some corporate law work for Foley and Lardner, doing M&A, VC, private equity, and then transitioned into his last role, which was executive vice president and law advisor at Bizlab. So since then, he's taken about 3 months off, just doing very interesting things, wrestling alligators, wing walking, all the sudden things we wish we would be doing, but are busy studying instead. And now he's back in the Bay Area to do kind of more along the lines of business consulting and advising. And we're hoping to bring him back to do some seminar series for us in either the winter or spring on, logistical things like speed reading and use of virtual assistants and email hacking. So with no further ado, thank you for showing up, Kesav.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So let me talk about why I'm here. When I was a law student, I was really excited to have all these guest speakers come. Duke, fortunately enough, has a name that attracts some top-tier people, and so we heard all these top judges and private equity executives, et cetera, et cetera. But the more I started going to these talks, the more I started getting disheartened. And the issue was, a lot of times I found that the university's incentive and my incentive for these talks were totally different. So the university's incentive was to bring someone to say someone was here, and my incentive was this useful? And I found that a lot of people, especially people in high positions, secretaries of states, etc., when they come, they don't really have an incentive to prepare the talk for that particular audience because they're too busy, right? So I came up with a term for these talks, which was TBU, which is true but useless. Right? And that's kind of what I struggled with as a law student. It was like, wow, everything you're telling me is true. I don't believe that you are lying to me, but this is useless, right? So the talk I'm here to give you today is a talk I wish someone had given me in law school. And it's focused on utility. So I hope it's the opposite of TBU. I hope it's true and useful. So here are my requests. I've got very little information here, about 3 pages worth. I'm going to run through it in about 10 minutes, and then totally open to questions if you want to talk about this or anything else. If you're interested in systems, like we were talking about how to use virtual assistants, speed reading, email hacking, etc., we can just go wherever y'all would like to go. Okay? So what I want to talk about is plumbing, because this is something that no one ever taught me in law school. So I am not here to talk to you about some highfalutin topic like how to negotiate with venture capitalists to get a certain amount of money or refine your pitch. What I want to talk about are the 7 skills of entrepreneurship that are really at the base of any business if you're going to go out there, and you can use them for your personal career as well. And the 7 are: keep your word, build your brand, focus on efficiency and productivity, prepare for uncertainty, understand financials, grow your network, and own the problem. Okay, so those are the 7 things I want to talk about. So I tend to think of things in problem and solution. So let's start with item number 1 here, which is keep your word. The problem is that business is about promises, and ultimately it's about reputational capital. Whenever you do a deal in any sort of functional form, ultimately people care about whether you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And so if you're bad at keeping promises in any way, shape, or form, you're going to be bad at business. So the solution is to keep your promises, right? So that's what I want to talk about here today. Any promise kind of has 2 components. 1, there's high quality work, and 2, there's a deadline. Okay, so if you're going to keep your promises, it's pretty simple. Do high quality work on time. So let's talk about the 3 ways to break a promise. If you fail to do the work entirely, you've broken a promise. If you turn in high quality work late, you've broken a promise. And if you turn in low quality work on time, you've broken the promise. So what I would tell you is, when you build your own personal reputational capital, make few promises, but move mountains to keep them, because that's ultimately going to get a lot of people to do deals with you. It's really important for all of you to know that there are only promises, and I say this at multiple law schools that I teach at. Many people think that they can fail on social promises and then maintain a reputation in work promises, right? So the idea is like, oh yeah, I'll be there at 7:30, and they show up at 10, right? Or, hey, I'll be there at that restaurant I told you I'm going to be at, but don't show up. And the truth is, there are only promises. And the reason I tell you that is, a lot of times you're going to build your reputational capital in social settings. You're going to build your business network out at drinks, out at dinner, out at meals. And so if you're the kind of person who tends to shrug off social promises as not valuable or not important, you're going to find that's going to burn you in a business setting. So start focusing on all promises as equal. I tell my team at Bizlab, listen, if I cannot trust you with the small things, I will not trust you with the big things. So if I can't trust you to show up to a meeting on time, I will not give you a big project that will help you further your career. And I would offer that same statement to y'all. So let's talk about how to be on time, right? So it should be a relatively easy thing. And everybody says, yeah, we can do it, I can be on time. But there's some people, and I'm sure you know them, or you may be one of them, who are perpetually late, right? And my response to that is, that's your fault, right? So you need to fix that. If you find that you're perpetually late to meetings or to deadlines, what you need to start thinking about is logistics, right? So I mentor some entrepreneurs, and they say, yeah, we have this problem is we schedule all these meetings, we're always late. And I tell them, well, have you thought about geographic distances and traffic and parking and walking from your car to the actual building? If you have to go into a phone call, have you thought about how long it takes to dial the conference call number and what you're going to do if things go wrong, right? So schedule time buffers in and just be known as a person who's always on time. Nobody keeps every promise. That's okay. I've never met anybody who's that's 100%, but that's not the point. The point is for you to have a high batting average. To get to the point where people know if you break a promise, it's for a very good and respectful reason. Like you got into a car accident, family member died. There's actually a small subset of reasons that if it happened to any of us, all of us would universally agree that's okay. But those are far between, few and far between. So you really need to think through like, why am I not keeping my promises? And if you struggle with this, what I would encourage you to do is just take a week and keep track of all the promises you make, big and small, of any caliber, and see how many you keep. So what is your batting average? Second logistical lesson is to build your brand. So here's the problem, the issue, okay? The context of a touch point with individuals often excludes or mitigates your differentiating factors. In other words, in many contexts, you're a widget because your special attributes can't sign, right? You can't show your special attributes to the world. And I'll give you an example in your context, which is OCI. Okay, so how many people have just gone through OCI pretty recently? Okay, so here's the issue with OCI, right? Someone sees a piece of paper, which is your resume, and then you come in and you have to be a differentiating person in person. But here's the issue. Everybody you're going against went to Stanford Law School or an equivalent good law school. And that firm only has a certain amount of time to study you and decide, like, is this person worth betting on, right? So when I went through OCI, my personal brand, my differentiating issue, was I asked one question, which is, does your firm carry debt? Okay, and I had multiple firms come back to me later saying that one question is what got me the job. And the reason was I interviewed in 2007, right after the first crash in the late 90s, and on the eve of the second crash in 2008. And so a lot of law firms understood that when I was asking that question, I was asking in the context of, listen, I know a lot of law firms borrowed money to maintain partner lifestyle after the crash in the 90s. And so they're carrying debt, and so they have a bad cash flow statement, a tough balance sheet. And if another crash happens, they're going to be in trouble, which is exactly what hit. And so having that key question, or that way to brand yourself, is where you're going to stand out among other people. So you really need to focus on your brand. So how do you do that? I think you need to build your brand to be memorable, okay? And so what I tell people when you build your brand is find the one thing that you're passionate about. Don't worry about if it's tied to your work or not. What's the one thing that makes you, you? That's step one. And then two is amplify. That's where you can use social media and other factors, okay? So let me give you an example of a brand I've personally built recently. So as Mark mentioned, I resigned from my job in July, and I said, I'm going to take 3 months and do my bucket list. And I had one delivery mechanism for my brand, which was Facebook. So I went and did all these things I wanted to do, which I'm going to show you, and I learned from mentors and other people that this brand started going out there. By the time I landed in the Valley, I had multiple people reach out to me saying, hey, are you the guy who went to alligator wrestling school? Or are you the guy who went ring walking? And so what I did was I built the brand as a way to become memorable and get the first conversation going. So here's an example of what I've done in the past couple months. you in a second here. So I went to all 50 states. This is in Portland, Oregon, finishing it. This is park slides in Utah, deep sea fishing in Alaska. This is a glider in Portland, Oregon. This is dancing with wolves in Colorado. My buddy throws a party in Chicago called Cheyenne. This is kiteboarding lessons here in the Bay Area. This is alligator wrestling school in Colorado. This is a trampoline park in Utah. This is archery lessons over here in Oakland. This is shotgun and skeet in Wisconsin. This is a Green Bay Packers suite. This is a human bungee slingshot, only one in the world in Utah. I get to pose with all these Emmys that somebody else won. This is circus school. This is a private mansion party in Nashville. This is adult space camp down in Huntsville. This is getting to chill with the CTO of the Giants. This is chasing zebras in Zambia. This is walking with lions in Zambia. This is a safari in Botswana. This is a microlight over Victoria Falls. We get to race cheetahs. This is Mount Rushmore. I'd never been to South Dakota before. This is wing walking on top of a plane. And this is roping school here in California. This is a Habitat for Humanity site in Georgia. And this is Swaziland. Bay Area on a boat. This is the Rocket Man. You put on a jetpack and go 30 feet up in the air. This is a zero gravity machine. This is the MAT trainer. This is paragliding here in Vallejo. I think that's it. So that's kind of a summary of what I've been doing the past 3 months. And so I have conversations around the Bay Area now, and a lot of people reach up to me and they're like, oh, you're like the adventure guy, right? Because my brand is Explorer. Now notice nothing what I told you was, hey, I know mergers and acquisitions, or hey, I can help you raise money, right? The point is to get that first conversation going. And so you need to sit and really think about, like, what is your brand, and focus on it and amplify it. I'll tell you right now, the number one mistake a lot of people use on Facebook, a lot of people make on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, is they don't build a brand that's clear. So I had a buddy come over, he's like, dude, you have way too many pictures. So I had like something 40 albums, he ripped them all down to 2 albums, and he helped me focus my brand on the one thing I want people to remember. Once you get a portion of people's mind shares with your brand, then you can make your pitch on whatever you have to sell them, right? Your abilities, your sales product, your services, but you need to build your brand first. Third thing you need to focus on as an entrepreneur, again, this is about plumbing, is focus on efficiency and productivity. So here's the problem. You are wasting time, energy, and resources on stuff. Okay, and the solution is you need to focus on efficiency and productivity. Efficiency is about ROI on time for activities, and productivity is a different question, which is what you're doing worth doing to begin with? Okay, so I've met entrepreneurs who are highly efficient at something, but they never ask the question, should I even be doing this in the first place? And so they're really, really good at doing something that's totally unnecessary to further their business. So how do you fix this? How do you build efficiency and productivity? So I think the fastest way to become efficient is to build and maintain systems. Look, systems work. It's just a routine or set of steps that you apply to a particular problem to help you do it more efficiently. If you want to save the most time, focus on routine activities first. So here are 5 that you probably spend the majority of your day doing. Sleeping, eating, typing, email, and reading, right? So if I took those 5 activities out of your 24-hour day, what would you have left? Not that much, right? So if you can focus on those 5 activities and build systems, you're going to be more efficient and productive. So a lot of stuff that I taught myself, or I had mentors teach me, again, speed reading, how to use virtual assistants. So I have a bunch of virtual assistants that work for me and help me just do my daily life. Email hacking, so I tend to process email faster than most people, not because I'm any smarter than any of y'all, but because I just put time and energy into it. To improve productivity, you need to do 3 things. 1, you need to start prioritizing. Okay, so you need to actively think about what's important to do. 2nd, you need to say no often, right? And the 3rd is you really need to organize your most important tasks according to your highest productive time. So it's sort of a fallacy of the human experience that we think every hour of the day we can operate at highest efficiency, and the truth is we just can't. So what are your 3 to 4 hours? That's what science shows that we can actually act at our optimum efficiency. What are the 3 to 4 hours of your day that are really, really valuable, where you operate at your best and protect that time ruthlessly? Okay, so prepare for uncertainty, right? So when I mentor a lot of entrepreneurs, or when we have, at Bizlab, we had a portfolio company, so I would meet with the teams and say, listen, here's the problem we need to solve. Things go wrong. It's that simple, right? They go wrong in life, they go wrong in business. So how do you prepare for that? How do you prepare for the unexpected? I think there's 3 ways you do that. You need to cultivate 3 characteristics in yourself. The first is be resourceful. The second is develop a skill called anticipate and mitigate. And third, prepare yourself through what's called general preparedness, right? So how do you be resourceful? You just want to be known as someone or a company that can find a way. And I think the best way to be resourceful or train yourself or company to be resourceful is to manufacture crises, okay? So I met this great traveler when I was abroad in Africa, and he used to play this game with himself where he would give his wallet to his traveling companion, take very little money, ask his friend to drop him off in a place that was like far away from where he was supposed to be, and he just had to find his way back. So if you as an individual are looking to like improve your ability to be resourceful, for me, my number one solution for you is just travel. You're gonna learn a lot about yourself when you don't have access to your home networks, when your phone doesn't work, when the power gets cut off, when you run out of money. You just try and find a way. And you develop that ability to start thinking through how to utilize resources to solve the problem at hand. I think manufacturing crises at company is a great way to take your organization and put it through tests, right? So the number one crises I tell people as entrepreneurs to really test out is cut your cash flow in half or by 2/3. And so if tomorrow we woke up and we had 2/3 the cash flow that we did yesterday, how would we solve this problem? And just going through that exercise teaches your organization to be resourceful, okay? The second category of skills under this rubric is anticipate and mitigate. So I would encourage you to start thinking about, for your very important activities, meetings, dates, whatever, to start thinking about a probability and impact matrix, okay? So if you imagine 4 quadrants, what are the potential futures that have a high probability of happening and will have a high negative impact on you? What are high probability activities that have a low impact on you? What are low probability activities that will have a high impact on you? And then what are the low probability activities that will have a low impact on you, okay? And so if you sort of generally like sit down and develop this foresight, focus on the high probability, high impact stuff, right? Things go wrong here, there's a good chance they'll go wrong. An excellent example, again, in the meeting context is, hey, I have to take a 101 to go from here to a meeting. There's very likely going to be traffic, and that'll mean I'll run late and make a bad impression. So given that, how do I anticipate that situation and then mitigate it? So start thinking through, for the important activities of your life, anticipate and mitigate. What could go wrong, right? So a phrase that I love that came to me from an entrepreneur in Chile was hope for the best, plan for the worst. You should always be thinking like that. Finally, general preparedness is stuff that sounds reasonable, you just have to make sure to execute on it, right? There's certain characteristics in your being or states of awareness that'll just make you better prepared for just about anything, right? It's better to be healthy than sick. When you're traveling, it's better to have cash on you for when things go wrong. But it's something as simple as like your phone should be charged, right? I've seen more business people lose a deal because they didn't have their presentation available to them for whatever went wrong. The computer died, they didn't have a backup, they didn't have Dropbox, right? So you need to think through like just general situations, like things you can do to make yourself generally prepared for the vast majority of things. The next skill is understand financials. Look, I think the problem here is if you don't understand financials, you don't understand the business. Okay, whatever career you go into, whether it's business, the nonprofit world, government, if you can understand numbers and really catch where it's going, where it's coming from, you're gonna be far ahead of everybody else. So financial statements ultimately tell the story of a company, right? Push past the marketing, push back past all the social media. Like if you can understand the financials, you're gonna be far ahead of anybody else, right? So when I was an M&A attorney, I was really shocked sometimes. We would go into a deal and there'd be like 20 attorneys in the room and no one could understand the financials with any sort of like cognizant ability, right? Especially if you're interested in startups, you're gonna find that a lot of financials are jerry-rigged. So someone who was never trained to put together financials was asked to put together financials. And there's kind of all kinds of things like coming in and out, and it may not make sense, but it's your job to unpackage it. Just keep reading as many financial statements as you can, and you'll learn stuff, right? You'll learn that in projections, the most important thing is, are the assumptions reasonable? Okay, so if a startup comes to you and says like, hey, we're gonna make $1 billion in 2 years, You ask them what are the assumptions they base that analysis on, and then you try and adjudicate for yourself, is that reasonable, okay? Same with companies with their past financial statements, historical statements. If you haven't read the footnotes, you haven't read the financials. Okay, so it may not be the thing you like to do, it may not be the most interesting, but if you can grasp the numbers and start understanding a P&L and a balance sheet and how they work together, you're gonna be far ahead in your professional career compared to anybody else. So the advice I wish someone had given me was take as many accounting and tax courses as possible in law school, because that's gonna put you well ahead of the game. Okay, let's talk about build your network. So I think the problem here is if you want to grow your business, but you don't have the right contacts, skills, knowledge, etc., what's the common solution? The common solution is to reach out to your network, right? The best advice I ever got was build your network before you need it, okay? So you need to get good at relationship management if you're not good at it now, and you need to start right now while you're a student. I'll give you an example. Here at Stanford, you have one of the most amazing networks on earth, right? The problem is if you don't use it, it's useless. And the worst time to try and build your network is when you need something, okay? So everybody can smell a sale. And so if I come to you and say like, hey, I need this, you're going to treat me differently than if we've been friends for 2 to 3 years and I say, hey, I need help with this particular problem. So a couple of quick tips. As students, you have this powerful platform, and the platform is go find mentors. So I'd encourage you to sit down and think, man, like these are the 3 things I need help with. Who would be the best mentors these activities, and go develop those relationships now. You'll have more people answer your communication because you're a student, than if you were not a student, just said, I need help, right? And then when you come out of law school 1, 2, 3 years later, and you can say, hey, I've had this relationship for like 2 years with the president of Stanford or this venture capitalist, and then you reach out to them and say, I need help with this thing, they're far more likely to help you. Second tip I would tell you, and this is the best tip I ever got from one of the best relationship management people I know, is always do the first favor, okay? So everybody has problems that they need solved because everybody has limited time. So no one can learn everything. And so what I try and do whenever I make a new contact or meet a new individual is I try and identify the one problem they have that I can help them solve, and I solve it for them quickly. And so they always leave our relationship or touch point with a good feeling because I promised something, I delivered, and I never asked for anything in return. So that's how I'd encourage you to start going and building your network. So let's talk about owning the problem, which is my last skill here. Business and entrepreneurship ultimately is about getting things done, okay? So if you can't get things done, or if you don't move the ball, then you're not gonna be seen as someone that other people want as part of their organization. So the solution is to own the problem. Let me give you some quick tips. Don't ask Google questions, okay? So if you've ever been in like a social setting and 5 people are standing around, they're like, man, is the population of San Francisco bigger than the population of Oakland? And people just start guessing, and it's like, oh, I don't know, maybe, I think so, I'm not so sure. It's like, well, you have 5 people with 5 smartphones. Somebody should be able to look up this answer pretty quickly, right? But it's the same in business. You would be surprised, again, talking about plumbing, how many things don't get done because someone just didn't move the chains as far as they could. So ask yourself constantly, like, am I asking a Google question? In social settings and business settings, because if you are, you should be going straight to your smartphone or equivalent device and just looking up the information on Google. So you don't want to develop a reputation as the guy who asks questions that will impose work on other people, right? So I'll give you another example. Maybe you've had this where you're like, hey, let's go meet at a restaurant, right? Anticipate and mitigate. What's the information people are going to need when you meet at a restaurant? They're going to need the name of the restaurant, the time of the reservation, the address, and start thinking that stuff through. And so you prevent a lot of what I call boomerangs, whether it's email boomerangs, text boomerangs of getting half the information you need as opposed to totality of the project. You should always anticipate reasonable questions and then research answers. So the best team members I've worked with are people who can reasonably see ahead of the curve and say, okay, I found this answer to your question for this project. It is probably likely that you are going to ask this next question, and so I have that prepared as well. And so if you're known as someone who owns the problem, right, who's thought it through from stage 1 to stage 3 to stage 5, taking it as far as you can within reason, you're going to go far in any organization. And you're going to gain a lot of respect. People are going to want you around because you're just going to get stuff done. So that's the totality of what I have to talk about. happy to open up and talk about anything I mentioned or anything else if you have general questions. You will always hear me be honest, so if I don't know something or if I don't think I'm the appropriate guy to answer your question, I'm just going to say that, so don't be insulted. I just don't want to give you bad information. So what questions do people have? Where can I add value? Just kind of go left to right here.
Okay. I was wondering, on your last point of owning the problem, where do you draw the line between taking it way too far and wasting a lot of time because you went down the wrong road? Because I feel like in a lot of places you can say, okay, you could possibly anticipate this question, but they didn't give me a piece of information that I needed, and so I went down completely the wrong path, did a fantastic job on it, but I wasted, 6 hours on something that they didn't need.
Yeah, so I think, so obviously it's more art than science, but I think your key point there is there was a piece of information that was absent, and so owning the problem is going and finding that information if you can on your own, right? You'll never have all the information you need, but you do need enough information to make an educated decision in any context. So don't be afraid to stop and sit down. It's like, before I take this further, I really need to know this stuff.
Right.
We've wasted a lot of money, I should say past tense, we had wasted a lot of money in Bizlab where we would go on a project and it was all our faults. We just didn't sit down and think through like the key questions. And we're sort of so eager to move, we didn't think about, do we have all the information we need? And it became pretty expensive because mistakes are expensive.
To go back to your information on branding, I feel like you emphasized that your brand didn't necessarily have to do with like the exact work you're then providing. So do you think that's like generally true for like a lot of good brands? Like it's more about being adventurous and like showing your personality rather than your actual work, or is like there a way to combine them that's effective? Or
Yeah, I don't think it's about being adventurous. I think it's whatever your brand is. I mean, if you care about music, then that's what you should talk about. I think at its very core, we're all attracted to people who are passionate about something. So it's got to be something you care about. Like, I am going to keep traveling and taking adventures, even if there was no social media tomorrow, because that's who I am, right? And so you need to really get down to your core. I think the logistical issue and the problem is that, again, context often prevents you from being able to show your differentiating factors. And a resume is a perfect example, right? On a piece of paper, often you're compared against other people who went to good schools and have had similar work experience, but not exactly the same work experience. So what can you put on there where someone's like, wow, this is like different. I want to talk to this person. And then we can worry about whether they have the capacity to do the job. Does that make sense?
yeah.
You mentioned email hacks and like virtual assistants. Can you talk about some of the specifics you use? Or?
Yeah, so I've been using virtual assistants since before law school. I actually had the dean of my law school yell at me personally. He was wondering if I was using my 5 virtual assistants to do my law school homework, to which I responded, "Is that allowed?" Which is not the response he wanted, right? I think what you find is that you don't need to lead most of your life. Okay, so the exercise to go through with entrepreneurs, to give you an example on virtual assistants, is if you sit down for a week with an Excel spreadsheet and track your life in 15-minute increments, and after a week you can sit down and be like, okay, what are the physical activities? I can't hire a virtual assistant for that. What are the virtual activities? And you'll be surprised at what you can give to someone else to free up your own time. Okay, so in law school I had 2 teams that I could scale up to 100 people, and then I had 3 other virtual assistants, and I had them going around the clock. So I used time arbitrage. So I had a lot of virtual assistants like the Philippines and India, and so they could work while I was sleeping. So I had a system where like I would send them something in the evening and be ready in the morning. Okay, so 2 ways that you can use virtual assistants. One is to help you do the things you are doing better, and the other is to do the things that you're not doing because you don't have the time. So here's a system I used in law school to give an example. I didn't have any money when I went to law school, so I had to be cost conscious, or at least intelligent about how I apply my budget. So I developed a grocery coupon system. So I developed a series of steps that I could have my virtual assistants run on any grocery list, and they would find all the coupons and send it to me, and I could print those out and take it to the grocery store. So every week or every 2 weeks, I would send them the grocery list. They would run the system I gave them to find coupons. They would package it all into a PDF. They would send it to me. I would print it out, and I would just walk those over to the grocery store. And I saved far more money on my groceries than what I spent on the virtual assistant. So that's an example. You shouldn't wait on the phone. So I always have my virtual assistants do like the due diligence calls. Here's an example of what I did in law school. So I want to go to every country in the world. I've been to all 7 continents and I've been to all 50 states. And so I had to go to Antarctica. And so I emailed my virtual assistant. I was like, I want you to find me the best deal to go to Antarctica. And she did all the due diligence research, and out of the option, she saved me something like $1,700, right? I say, hey, I'm going to Belgium. Like, these are the things I like to do. These are the things I don't like to do. Find me an itinerary to go to these cities that I need to go to, and then find me cool things to do. And she kicked back everything for me, right? So I highly recommend that you start using virtual assistants if you're not. If for no other reason than it duplicates the number of hours you have in the day available for work. Did I answer your question?
What about some of the email hacks?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about this at the Venture Studio at the Business School at 5 p.m. The very general system is automate, delegate, efficiently execute. Okay, so automate what you can, delegate what you can, and then efficiently execute what's left. I'm happy to share with you after, or depending on the questions, we can do it right now. But yeah, should happy to be a resource. Cool.
You talked a lot about systematizing your everyday routines, so sleep, diet, email. How do you go about creating a system for any one of those elements? You talked about using email spreadsheet and tracking every 15 minutes for VAs. How do you develop a system for diet or for exercise or for sleep?
I think you need to go learn about the subject first. So the most useful book I read on sleep, for example, is Dreamland. I highly recommend if you're looking for a consumer accessible book on sleep, go read it. And you're going to learn a lot of like very basic things. The first is just about all of us need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. So if someone tells you, hey, I can function on 3, statistically and biologically, that's not true. Okay. The second is, it turns out that light is the #1 factor that prevents us from sleeping. It has to do with how it like keeps us awake. So I just started sleeping in darker and darker places. You're going to sleep better if it's darker. Okay. It turns out that ancient sleep, so if we had natural light, like no candles, the way that humans used to sleep was in 2 phases. So we used to sleep until about like 1, 2 in the morning, then we'd have an hour when we were awake, and that hour was seen as like really productive time, and then we'd go back and sleep again. That's really hard in modern life. It's actually, if you try it as a personal challenge, like how can you avoid artificial light? It's an almost impossible task. But now you understand like the really healthy people, how they sleep, right? You learn about sleep banks. And so you start thinking about, it turns out that we treat sleep like a bank. So we can lose sleep up to 25 hours. That's kind of the max, right? And when you catch it up at 1.5 to 1 as the ratio. So every hour that you sleep, you replenish your bank by 1.5 hours. And so the truth is that the vast majority of you are underslept, which is a word I just made up, and dehydrated. So you need a lot more water, and you need to sleep more. So if you ever feel that you're slightly tired, what I encourage you to do is just like take a weekend and just sleep, and just keep sleeping until you can't sleep anymore. And you'd be surprised at how much more refreshed you are when you get up. So I have an alarm clock that wakes me up at my lightest point of sleep. Okay, so it turns out that the best time to wake up is when you are moving the most. So my alarm clock sends out these low frequency waves that monitors my sleep. And when
There's an app for it. You can download it.
there's an app for like your phone, you throw it under, and then it just wakes me up at my lightest point of sleep. So I'm more refreshed in the morning because of that, right? So a little bit more private information when you think about routine activities, to your question. So I automated my whole bathroom, right? So I have a touchless faucet. I had a touchless faucet, touchless soap, timed shower, because I was like, man, I'm like wasting a lot of time here. My scale syncs automatically with my Wi-Fi network. So I'm happy to do any Home Depot consulting with you guys. But that's an example of like building a system of like how I utilize the bathroom on a day-to-day basis, right? So.
Another question I had that's kind of along those lines is in terms of developing those mentors. I think it's easy to reach out and ask questions and ask for help up front. We were talking about maintaining that relationship over 2 or 3 or 5 years, and with a large network especially. How do you go about maintaining engagement over that period?
Yeah, I think maintenance is a great question. So I asked again, one of the best relationship management guys I know. He ran the Atlantic Foundation. For a lot of people who don't know, the Atlantic Foundation was this really big foundation, slightly smaller now, that was totally secret. And so the way they used to give away money is they would just kind of show up on your doorstep and say, like, we want to donate to you. They didn't want publicity. They weren't interested in showing the world what they did. And so what he said was, listen, he's like, I hate getting like the how are you emails, right? He's like, first of all, I don't have time. And a lot of people that I associate with don't have time. But I love getting the, I thought you would be interested in these emails. And so, I don't think you need, when you have like a relationship management, I don't think you need to reach out to that person like once a week or once a month. I think what you need to do is use your time with them to develop a really, really great experience that leaves them with good feelings and leaves you with good feelings. And then just like periodically, but on not any sort of set schedule, like when you understand something that they might be interested in, just let them know. And so the best advice he gave me was like, just forward people articles that you think they might be interested in. And you can put the NR, I don't know if you guys use the moniker NRN, which means no reply needed. A lot of people that I know use that now, and that's like a great way to like get your touch point and then hands off, right? What I'll tell you is like the more influential people I know, like CEOs of companies or famous government folks, the shorter their emails are, right? So you'll notice that if you start like emailing like a CEO, because he's answering from some sort of like smart device, and he doesn't have time to write like a huge message to you. So it's usually like 1 or 2 sentences, often it's like less than 10 words. And so given that context, right? So context drives usage. How you communicate with those people has to be different than how you communicate with other people who have more time and can write longer emails. Is that your question?
And so do you track some of those, do you keep a system for writing notes about people? Those of us with slightly more deficient memories?
Yeah, I don't. I've yet to find a great system for that. I keep it mentally. I'm waiting for someone to invent a system that'll make it easy for me. I really struggle with it.
And how do you manage your Facebook account? And how do you use it in first place to market yourself?
Yeah, so I've lived abroad for 8.5 years. I've been to 54 countries, and I've lived all over the US. And I tell you that because Facebook has been the one way that I've been able to capture a lot of relationships in one place. So the first thing that's important is now, especially here in the Valley, like when I meet people, I say like, hey, can I get your LinkedIn info and your Facebook info? No one said no to me yet. And so it gives me like a singular platform to share information. That's point one. So a lot of the community people that I want to interact with, they're all on my Facebook account. Then I'm just careful about what I put on there. And I sort of structure it to build the brand. And it's a lot of addition by subtraction. So I stopped posting like 100, photos of like an adventure and like 3 videos, which is a mistake I used to make. I really curated it down to like 5 pictures or less, and a video, if that makes sense. And I really keep things hyper-focused. And so if you come to my Facebook page, you'll notice there's like very little there. But that's the point. Because now when people meet me, I won't even bring up the adventure stuff, right? And so they like, oh, hey, then they go on my Facebook and they're like, whoa, like, this guy went to Antarctica, right? Like, this is him on top of Kilimanjaro. And again, it's about being memorable and giving people fodder so that when they introduce you to other people, they can say, hey, like, this is the guy who like went alligator wrestling, right? Again, I would do that stuff regardless, but I found it's a really powerful way to build a reputation and brand all over the world.
So is my understanding correct that the LinkedIn is to prove your professional capabilities, and Facebook is just to show your personalities and makes people think you're cool and interesting?
Yeah, I don't know if the distinction is accurate. I got to tell you, I've never been great at LinkedIn. In fact, I just hired someone who's going to do my LinkedIn profile. I don't know it well enough. I don't know how the algorithm works. I don't know how people search for. I met a great entrepreneur here. It was brilliant. He said he puts a lot of names in his LinkedIn profile. Like even if it's like, hey, I'm interested in Mark Few, the coach of Gonzaga, right? Or like I'm a big follower of like Eric Schmidt. Like all honest and true stuff. But he found that people searching for his profile went through the roof because they would search for these names and he would be the second guy, right? So there's a lot of tricks like that I don't know about LinkedIn. I wouldn't say the distinction is as linear and clear cut as you mentioned.
LinkedIn is actually a recruitment database, and at the consumer level we don't see that because our functionality is different. However, I'll give an example. Well, I'll explain the structure first. Behind it are corporates or hirers, essentially, and they're looking at you and filtering in a very different view. So hypothetically, over Christmas break, I put in my tagliner that I was looking for opportunities, and I had a general management program for BP sent to me. I had PwC contact me, and then I had major employers approach me. It says I'm a student. And so, and that's actually counterintuitive, and I did it as an experiment because usually it goes, don't say you're looking for a job.
Yeah.
However, I got major opportunities sent to me, and then I sent those through my Facebook. My Facebook is very different, and I was an executive, and I'm doing the career level executive work, and so I'm workshopping myself with my peers, mentors, and I was a management consultant, so I'm a power super user, and so we build work within it, we share articles within it, to the point you say about email. So it can be really powerful, and I have the complete counter strategy to you because I purposefully stayed university student, and I'm workshopping myself as an executive and very senior people. So I'm saying this to you, you can have a look at mine and can compare. And I had this discussion with one of the attorneys actually who was in the symposia last week, because he's like you, he's a brand strategist, and he wants just key message. And some people like that. However, to your point, it's where's your personality? And I haven't seen yours, so I was wondering, where's your personality? So my dad's in there and my sister. And a way to siphon off is I have different accesses for different people. So some will see my student workshop chat room essentially. Others who are acquaintances will see the cover only. And then you have different degrees of intimacy within. So you can really push Facebook to an extreme level and to understand what LinkedIn's real functionality is.
Yeah, it's great. It's really good advice. Like I said, I really need to dig into LinkedIn. I think it's a super powerful tool, and especially here in the Valley, people look at your LinkedIn profile before they look at your resume. Mm-hmm. I always operate on the assumption that anybody can see my Facebook, and I think that's the right way to go. If you really try, you'll find someone that can get you to look at someone else's Facebook. So you got to be careful about what you put up there.
I like transparency. So this is the counter thing. You're the brand strategist guy. I like the transparency, and particularly for where I'm going with my career. I just want I'm going to assume that you've looked me up and you will have understood and known everything, reports and all. So I'm comfortable with that level of transparency. However, from what you're prescribing, and it's wonderful overall advice, is you're really focusing on more yourself as an entity, you're a corporate as an individual.
Yeah, I think it's right. And it was a mistake I didn't do it before, and that was a mistake. I never focused on Facebook actively. I mean, it was just something I used socially. Was not very good at LinkedIn, and still am not. And so I'm learning how to catch up on those networks. But again, the best advice I got was find your passion and then use social media and LinkedIn as a way to amplify that to the world, right? You got to remember an effect called Facebook distortion, which is like people will see snapshots of your life on Facebook, and they'll derive a conclusion that the majority of your life is like that intuitively because it's a shortcut for their mental game, right?
So you're always on Kilimanjaro.
Right, which is crazy, right? I'm not. I'm reading books like everybody else, or at the grocery store like everybody else. But it's funny how social media can amplify certain portions of your life at the exclusion of other things.
With the virtual assistant hack, do you have particular virtual assistants that you have like a strong relationship with and had to do a lot of onboarding to? Because my concern is that I would like very particular things and I'd like them to be, like a clone of myself in that sense. So I'm just wondering how much onboarding it took for particular tasks.
Yeah, so I get this question a lot,
Yeah.
right? And the answer is like vaccines are better than cures, which means like the more prepared you are, the better your virtual assistant's going to do for you. I think the first thing is you just have to recognize that finding a virtual assistant is going to be like finding an employee for a company. And you are going to make bad bets, and that's okay. That doesn't mean the entirety of the endeavor is worthless, right? I apologize for holding my neck and shoulder. I went to cattle roping school yesterday, or Saturday, so my arm is pretty beat up. So second thing is like, develop systems for routine activities or things you want done, keep it organized, and that's what you pass off to someone. Okay? So if you don't think of a virtual assistant as like a virtual assistant as a sort of magical entity, but just as someone else is doing work for you, the better organized you are, the more effective they're going to be for you. Now, I do think training at the beginning is useful. The service I use now, and I'm happy if anybody's interested, I'll put you in touch with like someone higher up there, is Virtual. They really qualify their candidates early. It's $19 an hour. They're fantastic. Okay? But if that's out of your price range, and I totally understand that, like I said, I didn't have any money when I went to law school. I was using virtual assistants as low as $2 and $3 an hour in India, Philippines, etc. But there's training involved. And so what you also want to do, and we can talk about this further if you're interested, is you sit down, you do your needs analysis first, which is the Excel spreadsheet, and then you sit down and think, like, what characteristics do I need in people? So for example, I had virtual assistants where the only thing I needed them to do was research. I didn't need them to be good at spoken English because they never had to do a phone call for me. And so you find those characteristics, you hone it down, and then you can use a variety of like online marketplace networks, Elance, Guru.com, and they all work like eBay. So there's quality control ratings, amount of work done, et cetera, and that's how you find them.
I would just like to say a couple of things. I used to do the marketing for Boeing Gardner, but I want to say how important it is the way you have your brand, your venture thing, because what happens is a CPA firm will take your law firm, especially with the younger people coming in, and they'll match up like a young CPA and a young attorney, and they'll have friend of the firm dinners, and they match you up with somebody. So the more you have of your personal interest, out there, that's who they'll match you up with that first before they even match you up with what department you're in. So we didn't have Facebook then, but that was one of the things that we did all the time. And then your question about what if I'm going down the wrong path, that's so important because you can lose a lot of credibility by doing a lot of work and not even, look at Mad Men. That's a good example of how that happens. But that's really important. Is the tax portion too, I think is really important. We ran into problems because the CPA profession and law professions were changing at the wrong turn of the century. But once the CPAs started thinking they could set up companies, there were huge arguments about how much people were done billing. So I think it's important, but the best thing you can do is find some accountant and grow your businesses together side by side and divide up the work with them. So you don't really have to know everything, but you have to have a really good buddy that you work with all the time and you refer business back and forth to who does that part and you know ahead of time. And that's what we're doing.
So glad you brought that up. So I don't know how many people are actually considering a law firm or equivalent professional career, but let me give you the best advice I got. I'm going to give you a system on how you can differentiate yourself as your entry level in these law firms. Okay, so here's what you need to know about the legal industry right now. The legal market is not growing. Okay, so for a law firm to grow its billings, it has to take its market share from someone else. Okay, so 5 years ago, pre-2008, no major corporate law firm would take a first-year associate and say, hey, you have to do business development. They just wanted to train you, they wanted to have you attack the work as it came in. Now major corporate law firms are all of a sudden asking associates to get involved in business development activities. Okay, which is totally new for major corporate law firms. So if you're coming in and the question is like, how do you do business development? So a lot of major corporate law firms tend to go the traditional route and they don't try and be different, right? So the idea is like, we're gonna go to this conference and set up a booth with other law firms and hope that one of the GCs finds that we're differentiating with the marketing materials we have. So when I entered, I thought slightly differently. I said, if you can't be the best, be different. So what I started doing was I started traveling the country as a lawyer who would show up at entrepreneurs conferences. So for example, I went to a private conference y'all may have heard of called Summit Series. There was a cruise ship in Miami, and I was one of 3 lawyers on a boat of 1,000. And so in the major corporate legal world, nobody finds their lawyer out of a phone book. And so when people needed legal work from that boat, they started contacting me, because I was the only lawyer they knew, right? So if you can't be the best, be different. Between the work that I sent to my law firm and the clients I brought in about $500,000 worth of business. So my law firm at the time was $750 million, so it's not a ton of money, but that was real billings, plus there were a whole bunch of startup clients that are still with the firm that are starting to get their feet, right? So here's the system I'll give to you. What I learned when I was talking to a lot of successful people in their careers was everybody's looking to meet people that are smart, passionate in other fields, right? So I talked to this neuroscientist and he said, look, hey, there's no one in the medical field that you can really introduce me to that I can't get to with a phone call, right? I've just reached that point in my career, but I'm really interested in meeting artists and I'm really interested in meeting startup guys because I only have 24 hours in a day and the vast majority of them are spent sleeping or in the medical profession. And I heard that from other people as well. So the former CEO of the Miami Dolphins, we sat down and he's like, look, like I'm fortunate that I know a lot of people in the sports world, but I don't really get to meet startups. It's a time issue. So I went to my law firm and I said, look, hey, you guys have these baseball suites around the country. Give me the suites and a little bit of money, and I'll start bringing together people from different worlds and just getting out of the way. So twice at the Nationals, brought together a whole bunch of folks. I took people to the Yankees. When I joined Bizlab, I had a budget for this. So I took people to the Yankee suite. We had the former CEO of the Miami Dolphins, private equity hedge fund guys, doctors who had spoken to TED, a Holocaust survivor, right? I mean, just people from totally different worlds that individually they couldn't interact with because they didn't get those touch points. And we just created a great social experience for them. So here's the suite, food and drink, and then I took them out on the we'll figure it out, but I just want to help you. And through that, over time, I was able to bring in, not a ton of clients, but a good amount of clients, enough that I was able to differentiate myself and get more traction and support from my law firm to bring in more clients. And to this day, I keep a really good relationship with Foley. I tend to send them, clients whenever I can. It's on average, I send them a prospect maybe once a month, and they've been great back, right? So like when I was at Bizlab, they gave me the suite at the Nationals for free because that's how business works. It's about having those relationships and keeping your word when you say you're going to do something.
I have another question. Well, I understand most of the law graduates will end up in the law firm, but how, for those people who want to have a try in entrepreneurship, what makes them to shine out and excel in the entrepreneurship world?
Yeah, so you're asking a big question, right? So entrepreneurship, at its broadest umbrella form, could be anything, right? I had a mentor of mine at Stanford who said, look, lawyers can be entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs can't be lawyers. Which is right. So at least your differentiating factor is you come in and say, like, I am qualified by the state of blank to do X amount of work, right? I think you really need to go out there, and again, it's about preparing a pitch. So when you want to differentiate yourself, I tell people have 3 stories ready. The first is a story about some problem you see in the organization that you know how to solve. Okay, so you've done your research, you walk in and say, hey, I know this is an issue, and this is where I think I can be of service. One is to show what makes you distinctive. Again, this is coming back to your passion. And one is, I think you should always have a story that shows how you were resourceful. Because we all want people that are resourceful, right? Ultimately, work is about getting stuff done, and so we just need someone who can do stuff without a whole bunch of hand-holding. So I'll give you my resourceful story, and this is what I use for job interviews. So I was working in prisons in South Africa, and the black market in the prisons was pretty bad. So the only people as poor as the prisoners were the security guards, right? And so this was the scam that they ran. So when visitors, family, friends came by, they would confiscate all of the goods, the toothbrushes and toothpaste and equivalent kind of home goods, and they would only let people come in with cash. And then what they would do is they would allow the individuals to pass the cash to the prisoners, and they would sell these goods they confiscated back to the prisoners. Okay? That's how they made money. Everybody knew it was happening. And so I was in South Africa, I said, man, I really want to help these people. And I want to get them these common home goods and some food, but I have a security problem, which is to get into prison, much like getting through an airport, there's a scanner, there's a baggage scanner, and I didn't have a backdoor entry. So the question was, how do I get these goods past the security guard, right? So what I did was I set up a smuggling operation. So for 3 months, I took our first aid dummies, I was doing first aid training, and I sliced the neck, and I would stuff it with all these goods I'd raised, and I would get that past the security guards, right? And then once we were in the prison and the security guards left us, I would distribute that stuff to the prisoners. So I use that story as a way to kind of explain to people. I just kind of found the way. Now, we can argue about the legality of smuggling, right? I'm not sure that they were allowed to run the black market, so there was really no law saying I couldn't bring in soap and stuff. But that's an example of how I solved the problem. So if you want to differentiate yourself, again, it's find one thing for the organization that you research that you think you can solve and explain how you can solve it. Have one story ready about your passion, and then have one story ready about how you're resourceful. Yeah.
How do you read news? Because as I'm thinking about it, I waste a lot of time reading news articles, and I'm not sure. Both the question is like, how focused should you be? Should you know about world events if you're not necessarily into world politics? But then also just like actually getting down to reading and stuff.
Yeah. So news is interesting. I found personally, generally with reading, a frustration I had a couple years ago was like I forgot most of what I read, right? Which is really frustrating. So you get through a book, let alone a news article, and you're like, man, I don't remember anything a couple months later, right? But news is interesting. I think the goal is to keep yourself up to date. What you need to realize is a lot of news is an ecosystem. By that I mean if you look at the core news source, it's often AP or an equivalent agency, and then that information is duplicated amongst many news sources. So if you think about the internet as an ecosystem, you don't need to attack and read the news at like 17 different places. You just need to read that story in some version once, okay? Now we can talk about like political viewpoints, Fox versus MSNBC versus, and like New York Times, right? But the point is the vast majority of the facts you need to know are available in just one version of that article. So what works for me is I set a timer. I give myself X amount of time in the morning to read a certain amount of news, and that's it. And then I keep moving. Front page of the New York Times, now that I'm in the Valley, I read TechCrunch, GigaOM. Again, I kind of scan it, get through it, but the timer is pretty critical. If you are bad at timing yourself, there are browser extensions where you can set a blocker. So I have a blocker on my Google Chrome that only allows me a certain amount of time on Facebook every day. Because Facebook now is your news, right? That's my issue. So I block myself, and then the browser won't let me go on Facebook for the rest of the day.
Actually, I can add a functionality. I've established Facebook to be my feed for news. So I get Harvard Business Review journals, all the major publications. And then one of my mentors is the chairman of Deloitte's Innovation Center. And he sent Quartz, and that's actually, I think, a Harvard startup. And they, I guess, your virtual equivalent for news. So they send a one-pager of sentences, keys, then links to those articles.
That's awesome.
What's it called?
Quartz, Q-U-A-R-Z.
That's a great question. Information management is, I think, the primary time suck problem of modern professionals.
Yeah, I didn't give my email.
I mean, I'd be curious to hear just a little bit more about how you deal with email, because that's just one of those, it has to be done, and I've tried a bunch of different things, and I don't find any of them to be particularly helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, let's do it. I mean, if folks have time, I'll just hop on the whiteboard here. Is that a general inquiry that people are interested in?
Yeah.
All right.
It's just
Okay, I think you need to attack email from three perspectives. It's automate, delegate, what I call efficiently execute. Okay, so what I'm going to do is give you like the higher level steps. And basically the general idea is you should automate what you can automate, delegate what you can delegate, and then efficiently execute the rest. Okay? So what is email ultimately? Email is ultimately about two things. It's about typing, and then it's about call and response, right? Someone sends out a call, and they expect you to respond. It's that simple, okay? So let's start at the higher level. And what I'm going to do is, do most people here use Gmail or some version of Gmail? Okay, so if you can go ahead and open up your emails. If you have your computer, we'll just do this. The first thing you need to know is ruthlessly set up filters for the emails that come into your inbox. Okay? So I'm just going to talk you through it, give you an example of like how to do that. The first filter you should run, go into the filter function if you don't know how to use it, learn it very, very carefully. But you want to search for create what's called the unsubscribe filter. So you set up a filter where it says if it has in the body of the text the word unsubscribe, it's automatically going to be archived and marked red and kept away from my inbox. The point of that is to get rid of all the marketing emails, all that communication that is stealing your attention from the more important stuff. Okay? So the question I often get is, well, am I going to miss an important email? The answer is maybe once you will, but if you feel uncomfortable, you can do two things. One, say mark as red, and two, archive automatically. And then run it on your entire inbox. You can, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a checkbox that says like run on existing messages. And that'll clear out all that first wave of stuff. Okay? Second is you need to start looking at categories of emails that you really don't need to see, okay, on a day-to-day basis. And again, it's like you don't even want to waste time like opening them, archiving them, looking at them. I'll give you an excellent example I tell people, which is Amazon receipts. Okay, so if you shop on Amazon and you get a receipt like your order has been placed, and you get another email like your order is shipped, right? Do you really need to see those? So what you need to do is like start going through your email, finding categories that you don't even need to see in the first place. That's automating, okay? It's getting those filters. So let's get down to how to automate the actual call and response function. The second thing you need to do is set up what are called templates. So get yesware if you don't have it, or get canned responses, which is a native Gmail version. And what you want to do is do an email analysis and sit down and think like, what are the emails that I'm writing over and over again, and turn them into templates. So I'll give you some examples. I have an appointment template. And the appointment template anticipates and answers the majority of questions that I've gotten over time when I'm trying to schedule something, right? What time zone am I in? How long is the meeting going to be? What's my contact phone number? Who's calling who? Who should the person contact if there's an issue, which is my assistant, right? And so you just create that appointment template. And so it's like, hey, we should schedule a meeting. I can drop that template in there 3 clicks later, right? And like, I've already like sent that off, okay? You probably need an introduction template if you don't have one. But what I would encourage you to do is sit down and set up 20 templates for your most frequent emails. So again, this is frequency analysis. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so just jump in if you have any questions.
Yeah.
So now we've gotten from the filter level to the templates.
Yeah.
But you need to get down to phrases as well. There's a program called Text Expander, which I highly recommend you purchase. So the idea is you should start writing down the 50 sentences that you find yourself writing over and over and create shortcuts for them. So what Text Expander does is it takes like a shortcut phrase and expands it into a long sentence. So I'll give you an example. I write thank you for your time and consideration a lot. My shortcut is TTC. So I just type TTC and it expands that whole sentence. So I don't have to write these sentences over and over again, and they come across professional because I'm not mistyping anything. Apple, I see most people have Macs here. Apple has like a native version. If you have Windows, the program which is free is called Phrase Express. Does the exact same thing. But for the Mac, it's Text Expander. So what I would encourage you to do is sit down, after you've done your templates, your 20 biggest templates, sit down and find the 50 phrases you're writing over and over again. And you know what? You know a lot of them already. Great to meet you. Great to hear from you. Thank you for your time and consideration. Please call me here. You should have a shortcut for your physical mailing address, for your phone number, for your email. So what is the information that you're putting out over and over and over again? Okay? That's all part of automate. So right there, if you do those 3 things that I told you, you're going to cut your email time by about 60 to 70% is what I find in my experience when I tutor people. But that's going to require you to slow down to speed up. So just take like a solid 2 hours and sit down and do it. And you're going to find yourself over time like using templates a lot more. What I would encourage you to think about is common responses to common questions. So you may find that a lot of people ask you like over time, like, hey, where do you want to go to eat? Right? If you get that question a lot, because you're going out to eat like once a week, start thinking like, what are the common responses I can kind of just drop in there, right?
Yeah.
So that's all automate. So now we've kind of hit the big points of automate. Let's get to delegate. So if you have a virtual assistant or if you have team members, what you can do is you can set up filters that automatically forward certain emails to other individuals for them to handle. So I have certain things that my virtual assistant handles for me. Scheduling, again, is a perfect example, but research queries. And I can set it up so it's like, hey, it automatically forwards to the virtual assistant team, so I don't have to deal with it. Right? And so it's like forward, archive, I never even see it. There's going to be a couple instances where like that was not supposed to happen, but when that does, the recipient's going to say, oh, did you mean to forward this to me? And you can say, oh, no, it was a mistake, right? But the important thing is to set up the default, and the default's the forward. So I would highly recommend that you get, again, a virtual assistant, or if you have a team member, delegate the description of tasks and how they're going to work, and set up a way where like that stuff's like automatically forwarded to someone else. Okay, well, let's talk about efficiently execute. I think you guys may have seen, but there's kind of a movement for 3 sentences or less in email. The number one thing you can do on the efficiently execute level is typing. Okay? So you need to learn how to speech to text, right? It turns out that we speak 5 times faster than we type. So you should go get a program called Dragon Nuance. It's basically the only one out there. If you have a Mac, the Mac has a native version of speech to text, which I find is good for emails, but it's not great for document creation. The Dragon is more robust. And you need to start getting in the habit of speaking your messages. Okay? But efficiently execute is also about being intelligent about like what platform you use to use what activity. So I can tell you right now, you're faster answering emails on your computer than on your phone. So you need to think about like, does it make sense when you get emails on your phone to answer on that phone? Like, is this really urgent enough, right, that I should answer my phone? Or I can do this later and far more effectively, efficiently, and productively on a computer. By the way, if you have an iPhone, I don't know what it is in Droid, but if you have an iPhone, you should learn how to use the keyboard shortcut feature. That's the equivalent to text expander on the computer. And so you can just type in shortcuts and the phrases expand. Works in text messages, works in email, works in search. And you should learn how to speech to text on your phone. So I answer all written communication on my phone when I'm in quiet spaces by talking into my phone, right? So that's really the key in efficiently execute, is like sitting down, like what platform should I be using? And then speak your emails. And again, over time, and you probably have this because you've probably already written 10,000 or 20,000 emails, you have a repository of information that you can push up the phases. So like you have phrases that you efficiently execute using your speech to text that you could save in your text expander or as a template. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So if you just tackle this, there's like little nuances you can do, but honestly, if you isolate these, you're gonna get like 80% of the way, and you're just gonna fly through stuff a lot faster. There's a principle I love called Ohio, which means only handle it once. I think a lot of people make that mistake in emails, like they kind of open the email, close it, go to the next email, come back to it, right? So start getting in the habit of like Ohio, like only handle it once. If it's 5 minutes or less, just do it right now. If it's going to take more time, figure out the action steps to move the ball. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, thank you.
Do you have any questions on it?
No, I don't think so. I'll think on it.
Okay.
So delegation only means delegate certain work to the virtual assistant, and that's it.
Or another team member, right? So let's take it in, if I could have used virtual assistants to do my law school homework, let's walk through it, right? Got to read a case, and I have to be prepared for the professor, okay? So what I could have done, last thing I did this, I will not confirm or deny on video, right? What I could have done is sent it to a lawyer in India who I hired to summarize the case for me.
Okay.
Right? So it doesn't have to be a virtual assistant. You can actually hire highly qualified people to delegate the work to.
Cost is a problem.
Yes and no. So this comes down to 2 things. One, the traditional answer, which is like, what's the cost of your time? And more, the second answer, which is like functionally how much cash do you have, right? So the academic answer is like, well, what's the value of your time? And then you go through this analysis. And the other answer is, well, I just don't have any money, so I can't do this, right?
To the extent you can.
In the second category, what I would think about is, think about joining a collective or having groups, right? So one thing that I did to travel more is I have like this frequent flyer mile group and we trade miles, right? When I was a law student. So I had a law school professor who actually helped me get my ticket to Antarctica because she did the frequent flyer mile ticket. You can do the same with virtual assistants, right? You get a community of people together, pool your cash, no different than any other shared resource allocation. And then make sure you allocate the time effectively.
Where are you on things like legal force and the new, legal and CPA virtual services?
Yeah, I think they're great. I'll give you the answer from a slightly different lens, which is I counsel a lot of people on how to negotiate cheaper legal bills. Okay? So if you look at the history of the legal industry, and you guys should know this, especially if you're going to a corporate law firm, law firms originally were focused on being the best for their client in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, and they started to become bigger and bigger entities. This is when mergers between law firms happened. In the 80s through the 90s, and they became profit-maximizing entities. So their incentive changed from let me do the best for the client in this local market to how do I make the most money, right? Nothing wrong with that, it's a business, but it's important to understand that mindset. The difference is that a lot of people don't know that law firms used to compete locally, right? So if you hire a plumber, the plumber has to compete against other plumbers that can physically get to your location. But lawyers have to compete nationally now. All to say that you can get the same quality work for what you need done, and you can send that to Birmingham, Alabama, or Atlanta, Georgia, or Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and automatically your bill is going to be like 50, 60% cheaper because the rate is tied to the local market, but the work is being done by the same highly trained individuals, right? So to answer your question, I think virtual is just the next step beyond that of, hey, I used to have to get this work done here, but now I can send it somewhere else and save on the legal bill, which for a lot of startups is a cash flow issue. Did I answer your question?
Quality is there?
I think the quality is at certain levels. I think it's like anything else, right? And there's sort of bad lawyers and good lawyers, like there are in any other profession. And so being intelligent about finding people you trust, but understanding the pricing mechanism is going to help you save extraordinarily well on your legal bill going forward. So this is my contact information, personal email, cell phone. Anybody have any questions anytime, like feel free to contact me. Happy to help in any way I can. Any other questions?
Thank you, it was very inspiring.
Yeah, no worries.